I'm Matt Cederberg, co-founder of T Splines Inc., and thanks for joining us for today's Jewelry Design with T Splines webinar with Travis Serio, the winner of the 2010 T Splines Organic Design Contest. Today, Travis will talk more about how he made his award-winning model and why he chose T Splines. However, I think the greatest benefit that we'll all get today is the chance to ask Travis questions about how and why he uses T Splines in his design pipeline. Now, all attendees are muted, so please ask your questions throughout the webinar by typing them in the box on the side of the screen. We will be typing back answers throughout the webinar, and then Travis will also audibly answer questions at the end of the webinar. And now, if you've seen very many of our webinars, most of them are meant as tutorials where we show you exactly how to use T Splines commands from the ground up. That's not necessarily the focus of today's webinar. This is mainly Travis kind of showing how he made his the signet ring for the contest. However, please ask questions if there's anything at all that's unclear, and we would love to type back clarifications throughout the webinar. So now to introduce Travis, Travis Serio is the head of production and manufacturing for Rudy's Inc. in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and he also runs the CAD/CAM Trav jewelry forums. And he's the type of designer who, to be honest, makes stuff look good no matter what software he uses, so we're just pleased that he's using T Splines. So with that, let's make Travis the presenter.
Sweet. Thanks, Matt. I'm glad everybody came out. So I'm going to just give a kind of a brief overview of what I did to create this family crest ring using T Splines. And pretty much the entire ring was completely T Splines from either a plain or a T Splines primitive, and then just I started extruded everything. So the first thing that I did was I went out and found the rampant lion, which was adorns the crest of the Bennett family crest, which is actually the Scottish clan I'm a part of. But so we have the rampant lion, and to build the rampant lion, the only thing I do is I always tend to start with the primitive plane, and I just get it out there on the screen, and I go to town extruding edges and making all that happen. I got to move my webinar stuff here. But so to do that, I simply just start bringing everything out, turn on some control points or edges, and I just start going to town, tracing everything out. And this took me a while. The lion took me near about a day working on it off and on here and there. I'd work on it for a little bit, and then I get distracted with other projects and go do those. But just using good old-fashioned alt and extrude, I just start pulling everything out and playing the trace game.
So Travis, what took you what took you the longest when you were doing this?
I have to say his head and his face took me the longest. I can skip to once he's finished. Once I get it all traced out, I just thicken him using the thicken command up here. Each one of these pieces individually thicken out, and then once I have them, I can adjust them in the Z to give him some sort of undulation there and keep him off from being just good old 2D. And that was what was cool over doing this in T Splines versus doing it in just standard NURB surfaces, because all you could do then would be like trace it or try to sweep it, and it just never works out right or never quite lines up the way you want it to. And then the only way you can really manipulate it is through Cage Edit, and Cage Edit just doesn't give you the control over the surfaces that T Splines gives you. So it turned out much more fluid and much more natural looking in T Splines, I thought. But so that piece got pretty heavy. It's a pretty taxing T Spline on my machine. There's a lot of resolution, a lot of star points in it. So I pretty much, once I have this done, I turn it off and try not to mess with it until the end. But once that was done, the next thing that I had to do was make the shank. And the shank, I started from just two primitives. I used the cone. Oops, to hit the icon here. Hey. I use this cone for the top, and then the cylinder for the shank itself. And I get all these tricks from watching Juan's videos. Um, that makes making this stuff real easy. So I just essentially grab that and throw it away. Just get rid of all this stuff here in the center that we don't need. And this is an easy way to make simple circles and stuff. You can do it with extruding, you know, a regular circle, NURBS curve. But I think doing it this way, I like doing it with the primitives because I can visually see how many faces I'm going to get, so that I know that face lines all match up. So for when I do things like bridge, I can get them all together nice and easily. So I'll bridge that. And so I pretty much go along and just bridge, and then this is straight out of Juan's video. No secrets there. And then, you know, weld you to you like that. And once I get that going, then I can kind of start hooking up some symmetry. You can throw that away. Symmetry is a lot of fun. That might work right there. Let's turn that on. So we get the symmetry going in the X and Y. Oops. Actually, let me not do symmetry yet. Let's do this. Do I look oval here on the screen, Matt?
No, you're looking great.
Cool. All right, so let's scale this down a little bit. So I'm going to Alt extrude that out a little bit to get that edge right there, and then I'm just going to set point up here. And we'll set point in the X to get that back up against the construction plane. Now I think we'll go ahead and do symmetry. There we go, so that's a little better. And then I always like to make uniform after I do anything like that. Matt has taught me well. My first few T Splines models were pretty sloppy, and then Matt showed me the make uniform, and I was like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, and just to clarify that make uniform, what Travis clicked on was the T and the star icon. He right-clicked that, and that does the make uniform, and that just kind of relaxes the surface. If parts of the surface look kind of pinched, then that can really just relax it.
I just start scaling all that stuff in. Whoops, I'm going to lock that so I don't grab that anymore. But then I just start moving all that sort of around. Get it lined up there on the finger. And so I just chase all this stuff around until I get it pretty much looking how I want it. And that's what's fun too about T Splines, is that, you know, I don't have to be worried about curves or any of that stuff. I can just kind of push and pull things until I get them how I like them. I use this one curve obviously out here because it represents the finger size of the ring, so I have to be fairly accurate about that. But other than that, the rest of the design I can just kind of do whatever feels natural and lay it out. So once I have that, we can switch to edges and then use bridge. I can bridge across here, and I'll use 4 segments going across. And that breaks my symmetry, but that's okay. That gives me a nice inside, comfortable looking finger. To do my tops, you could always use fill hole, but I always like to try to keep everything quads, so I like to bridge across the top. And so I know that I have 1, 2, and then that leaves me with 2 extra faces right here that I'll need to patch up. So when I bridge, I just count these extra faces here, and I say there's 2, so I need 2. Turn my points on, I can weld from U to U, and then I can weld U to U. So that seals up the top, nice. Switch to edges, select this ring, insert an edge here. Then I can just select around, pull down. Now usually when I extrude and they start to get heavier like this, I'll go into box mode, hold Alt to extrude, and then I'll Alt left click again just a little bit to get one extra little ring right around here to add some quicker ramping there in that curve.
So Travis, why did you insert that edge a couple steps back?
You're talking about right here?
Yeah.
I did that so that when I pull down, I want this to be more narrow. Otherwise, if I don't, when I drag down here, I don't have the approximate thickness that I wanted for this. It's a little thicker than I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So inserting that ring gives me another row of faces, and it kind of defines where that edge was going to be.
Okay, so when you're working with T splines, then like inserting an edge is maybe one way that you can use to get more control over the curvature and the shape. Then.
Yes, exactly. I use that because I know I can define a region where I want more detail or where I want to control the detail. So that kind of rounds it off, squares it up, and I know that the edge is going to remain sort of this thickness. And I just grab all this in here. Oh, one more. I'd say it's a little too thin this time, but so that's the basis for the ring shank. That was it. There really wasn't anything else to that. Once I put that together, I moved on to the helmet, and the helmet was essentially a primitive T Splines cube that I deleted some faces on and started pulling around. This front little mask piece was just a plane that I thickened after I pulled it out, bent it around, thickened it up, and then started adding some resolution and some weighting. And so I'll show you a little bit of that. Let me hide that. So that just started off just a basic primitive cube, like so. And then I deleted the faces off the bottom. That. Then, oops, let me get this other one back here and we'll lock that. So then it's just a game of scaling everything how you want it. I started off trying to do this guy with a sphere, but the spheres have those triangled poles at the north and south pole of them, and so I found that when I work with a cube, I can sort of push the cube into the shape of a sphere a little bit easier. So I prefer to work with it over using the sphere itself. Turn on some symmetry here. And just start pushing and pulling. To get this section, I'll add another, insert an edge right along here. Now I might scale that up.
Just one note is Travis is kind of moving parts of the model around. You'll notice he has in his heads-up display he has his hotkeys enabled, and that's how he's switching back and forth between edges and vertices and the different manipulators, like the translate manipulator and the scale manipulator. He could also just be clicking that blue text up in the heads-up display, but you'll notice that when you're really working and doing kind of sculpting T-splines like this, then learning the hotkeys can just really help the program get out of the way and let you work faster. And Travis, could you actually pull up the hotkeys and the options just to kind of show where they can be found? So that's just in the T Splines options. If you just click on the hotkeys, these are the hotkeys that Travis is using, and so you can use them yourself if you'd like to.
Yeah, I actually spent about 2 weeks modeling the front bumper of my car to familiarize myself with just using the hotkeys. And once I got the hang of it, and I think it took me right at about 2 weeks to become somewhat proficient at grabbing the different keys without hitting the wrong thing or screaming and yelling. Once I got the hang of that, T-splines really just started cranking along for me. It feels real fluid, and you just model. You don't think about clicking this button or that button. You just start doing everything from right in here, and then occasionally come out here. There's no curves. There's nothing in my way. It's a really, really fun way to model, but I definitely enjoy having the hotkeys. That for me, I'm not much of a button clicker. I like that a lot more.
So, Trav, here's a question. It appears that you manipulate more using the vertices than the edges. Is that true?
It depends on what I'm making. I don't think there's one more than the other that I use. For this section of it, yeah, I like the vertices because most of the points where I have to tug are right here where multiple edges meet. And since I can't just grab right here in the center of this edge and pull, the vertice works better for making this more circular right here. But in some cases, you know, to get more of the helmet shape or whatever, it's easier to use an edge. So I don't know that there's really one that I prefer more than another. I think it just depends on what I'm dealing with right at that time. I tend to go back and forth between all of them quite a bit. But so yeah, I just kind of chase this thing around for a while and get it the way that I kind of want it, which this is not the way I want it. But and so I chased that helmet for a good little while. I actually made it a couple times. Like I said, I tried to make it with a sphere first, and it didn't really go the way I had hoped because of those poles at the top. It did work. I could never quite get this line like I wanted it down through here because of those polar caps. It left me with a tightly pinched sort of seam right there that didn't really work very well for me. But then just extruding out, we can start to shape him out a little more, build his shoulders and stuff. So that was that. I pretty much chased that whole thing around for a couple hours until I got it kind of like I wanted it, which was pretty much like this. I figured out the size that it was going to be, you know, it's going to be that big, so it didn't need a whole lot of resolution. It just needed to really define the overall shape. So that was that. I thought it was a lot of fun. I've made these before in just using like curved network and stuff like that in Rhino. It's such a hard process, and it's never a good time. It works, but it takes you for a while. So after that, I actually ended up doing my leaves a couple times. The first time I did the leaves, I did them based on the heraldry artwork that I'd found online for my family crest. But I spent hours working on all the leaves, and then I realized that they didn't fit in my circle very well at all. So I threw those leaves out completely. Yeah, I showed it to a buddy of mine. Thanks, Brian. I showed it to a buddy of mine, and he said, "Why do the leaves look jammed in the circle?" And then, so I threw the whole thing away and started from scratch again. And this time, I basically just went out and I found an image of just some sort of scrolly leaf work, and I just got what I needed, and then figured I would just build my own sort of leaf work inside there, because who knows, who's to say the one on the web was right anyway. I think I found 12 different versions of my family crest while I was looking. So this was the same technique over again, the same thing that I always do. I start with a 2D plane primitive, and I just start pushing and pulling. And I spent a lot of time on these guys trying to get that twisting look. It took me a while. I would extrude it, and then I would rotate and extrude and rotate, and to where I got them to twist over on themselves nicely. And then I would try to thicken it, and sometimes they would thicken through themselves, so I would have to go back and sort of rotate a little bit more to make sure when I thickened it all up they didn't cross through themselves and mess up. But this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this part the most because it was neat to just sit there and rotate everything and twist it and make them all flow like they really would. Where if I'd have done this in the past, I would have been real tempted to just trace around the outside of all this, straight extrude it, and then maybe cage edit it a little bit or try to chase a fillet somewhere, and I wouldn't get that twisting look where they fold over on themselves quite as well as I was able to achieve it with T Splines. It was just a much better way to go about the whole thing, I think. It was a lot more fun, that's for sure. It didn't feel like a chore trying to model it. It actually was. It was fun to chase it all down and make it work. So once I had the leaves, it was just a matter of sort of constructing it all and putting it all together then at that point. And I built the circle in the top and got that all worked out. At this point, the model was really heavy, and working on all of it together on my computer became almost impossible. Even now, I'm trying to keep it separated so we don't have to have all the elements on the screen at once, because once I get them all out here, there's so much information and so many star points in the model at this point that it's just super duper heavy. The banner was fun too. The banner was neat. Again, it was just a 2D plane primitive. Started here, just started extruding it out, and then I pulled it down and around and just went all around, and then used the thicken command and just thickened it all up. And it was fun to kind of do that down around these little floral patterns. And then what was also neat was having the ability to pull this out and make it a little bit wider and not have to go back and resweep it. I've made a whole bunch of these style banners over the years for military style rings, and what's always the worst is I'll put a banner in and then I'll go back and I'll machine it on one of the CNC machines, and when I come back and take a look at the finished product, the banner's too thin, and so none of the text is legible. So then I would have to go back, widen out all my curves, resweep them all to get them all nice, where in T Splines I can just come in here and correct it, make my text a little bit larger, and I know it'll machine out better this time without having to throw everything away and start over again. For me, I think that's the single best benefit of T Splines, is being able to make subtle changes like that without having to throw everything away and start again. It's such a great ability that we've just never really had in Rhino. And to have it now is just, it's hard to give up. Once you start modeling like this, you want to tend to make everything like this. So once that was out there, it was just a matter of putting it all together. Can I have that here? I think I tried to save these off as like a cooking show here. So this was all a period of about a week. I would work on it for a little bit here and there. Now I'm leaving this guy in box mode. If I try to convert him to smooth mode with everything else out here, I'm scared my webinar is going to shut down because it's heavy. But that was pretty much everything out and together out there on the screen, all in T Splines. The shield was real simple. That again was a 2D plane. That's pretty much how I model everything. I used the 2D plane Started up here, just drag it out, extruded off this edge, just extruded it down and around, and then thickened it. And then once I had it done like that, I thought it would be cool to add more definition to the leaves and stuff at this point, which was kind of challenging to do at this stage because of how everything is so heavy. And I think one of the great benefits, another thing that has been huge for many of us, one of the other things that has been just absolutely huge is to be able to take this stuff and to take it over to other applications like ZBrush. And traditionally with standard NURBS models, we've always had a very, very hard time because Rhino likes to make everything in triangles. And so when we transport over to other applications like ZBrush, the triangles are often too heavy, the topology of the model's not right, and it's just very, very difficult to get sculpting nice and perfect like you want in ZBrush without having to do a bunch of workarounds. But T Splines, if we export them in box mode, they will actually come right over into ZBrush and they sculpt up like magic. So this is another huge workflow benefit for us in being able to use T Splines. And so here are just some of the screen captures from. I took just these separate little pieces into ZBrush, and then I spent literally maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I just traced the outline of them. And nothing fancy. I didn't do any heavy work on them at all. Just literally traced them out, drew in where like the little veins of the leaves would be, and then just re-exported them back out. And so this has always been very, very hard for us to do in the past, working in the Rhino to ZBrush and then back to Rhino transition. It's just never gone very well until now. So that's great.
Travis, do you happen to have ZBrush on the computer that you're on right now?
I do.
Is that, would that be, I know it's trivial, but could you actually just show how to export a T-spline in box mode and bring it in there?
Sure. Yeah, this is a great feature of ZBrush, and this was actually or not ZBrush, but T Splines. This is one of the reasons why I really found T Splines super useful in the beginning when I didn't know how to make models with it. So this was a huge feature for me. So let me see. Let me open one of the leaves here. So we'll open this up. Now, the key to this is that you have to be in box mode. When it's in the regular smooth mode and you export it, it will actually export NURBS geometry or triangles based off NURBS. But in this box mode, this is a mesh, so when you export it, Rhino won't remesh it.
And just to clarify, the way to change it into box mode, Travis is hitting the tab hotkey, but there's also this icon, the smooth toggle icon, if you could just mouse over that.
Where is that?
It's the circle and square.
Oh, here it is right here. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I never use that. I'm sorry. Yep, that's it right there. So if we toggle that, it goes back and forth. All right, so let's export this. And you want to save as an OBJ file. And then we'll say it's on the desktop, and we'll just say leaves. Then when it comes up, just polygon mesh, and yeah. That's all good. So then we'll do import. And let's get to my desktop, and here's our leaves. And it's going to think about it for a second here. And then we just draw them out here on the canvas and go into edit mode. So there it is in box mode. Now when we subdivide this in ZBrush, we go up a few levels. As you can see, it comes straight back. And it is, since it is an all quad-based mesh now, it's exactly what ZBrush wants to use. My screen's kind of low here, so I'm missing some stuff down here. But so yeah, now we can just kind of do whatever it is that we want to do to it. I don't have my tablet hooked up, but Now we can just sculpt on it without any real worries at all. Oops. And we can kind of do whatever we want. I can't use ZBrush without my Wacom tablet, so forgive me. But you can see we can scribble on it, do whatever we want to it, and then re-export it. It works absolutely flawlessly. It's perfect. So once I had that, I brought it back in, and it looks pretty much like this. I did the little bit of work there to the helmet. I just embossed it with some spheres, really, and kind of some stroke patterns, and then the leaves. And then I Boolean T Splines right across here.
So do you bring it back from ZBrush and convert back to T Splines, or do you leave it as a mesh?
I leave it because at that point it's so heavy. When I was in ZBrush, I was actually working at 5 million polygons, and bringing that back will probably destroy Rhino in trying to convert. So I actually decimate this down a little bit using the ZBrush decimator tool to about, I think I got it down to about 30,000 polygons in this set of leaves and the helmet.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy.
And
there are
not quite, is it?
Yeah, it is possible though to come back from ZBrush as all quads and to turn it back into T Splines. I think probably for jewelry it's not necessary, but I know a number of industrial designers who will actually use that and come back and bring it back into T Splines and then convert that to NURBS out of ZBrush as well. But maybe not necessary for this workflow.
Yeah, I could definitely try it. I would be scared that my computer wouldn't have the resources.
We don't need to do that now, but
yeah, let's try it. But yeah, that's pretty much that. That was pretty much the whole thing. After that, I made a little canvas there and tugged it and pulled it for the render, and that was it. That was the whole process. So it was great. I mean, T Splines functioned in a way that I've never been able to work in just Rhino alone. So it was a huge help.
Well, good. We've got some questions already, and looks like there's more coming in. But here's a question: how did you go from the full helmet to the flattened and angled helmet that you have on there?
I just rotated it. I just rotated it a little bit and scaled it 1D. I got it into the forced perspective sort of view that I wanted. You know, I just rotate and then squish it 1D. Here, we can open that guy up. Which I did some more work on that. I was looking for at one point where I had saved off the helmet, but what I do for all that stuff to get the forced perspective is just rotate it in the view that you want. Like, let's say that that's the view, and then just simply scale it 1D to fit where you want it. And then so that starts giving you that forced perspective. Oh, I still have symmetry on. I'm sorry. Helps if you turn your symmetry off. There we go. The symmetry was causing some bad rotating there. So yep, that's how you get that sort of forced perspective there. Cool. See if I can see the other questions too.
Travis, one other question. You talked a lot about thickening T Splines. Could you just kind of show like a simple example about how
Sure.
thickening works? Maybe like rotating something and thickening, or
so when I draw all these out, this is all completely flat, and you can see it's just laying on top of this flat picture frame here. And then once I grab the thicken command, you can just pull it up. And what's great is that it's an offset surface for Rhino that actually works, which is fantastic. So there it just thickens thicken that right up nice and perfectly. And what's cool is that, now you can come in and you can start grabbing on your edges and stuff, or your faces, or your verts, and just start pulling on it, making everything poofy and all that neat stuff. We can insert more edges to kind of square it off a little more. And so that sort of squares up the sides, and so that's pretty much how I chase everything that I make in T Splines. I usually start flat and then thicken, and then go back in and add resolution and detail where I might want it or need it. And it's cool because you can just grab wherever. Just thicken it all up. The tail's too thin or whatever. We can come out here and make those changes. Sort of pull it out, do whatever we want to do to it. And that's the entire way that I pretty much make everything.
So here's
move all this down.
Here's a question about thickening. When you thickened it, it had those kind of nice round edges. Can you thicken a part and have it have straight, like, creased edges?
Yes. All right, so let's go back. There's an option in there for in the thicken for creased edge. So we hit thicken, and then it's right here, crease edges equals no. We switch that to yes. Then we come in, and when you thicken it now, it still has that super hard edge like a regular extrusion in Rhino. What's kind of neat though, here's a good point to use make uniform in these star points, but what's neat is, since it's still a T-spline, it's still editable, which is kind of cool. I don't use the creased edges too much because for me, I would probably just use a regular Rhino poly surface for that, or a Rhino solid extrude for that.
And could you just hover over the that thicken icon? There, the screen delay was a little bit slow just to show where that thicken icon is.
Sorry.
There we go. Yep. There's the thicken.
That's probably my number 2 used tool. Plain thicken. Well, and insert edge.
And actually, there's a question about how did you start with the plane? If you could just maybe show how you pull that up and get that into position again.
Sure. I'll make this piece right here. So I'll throw the plane out there, and you can do this with a pinned face too. I use the plane because it kind of starts me off with this little quad area, but then I just start pushing and pulling it and extruding edges. So we'll go here.
And I think
hold
that
Alt and drag, which is the same thing as clicking extrude.
And again, I think the screen refresh isn't keeping up very well, but to get that into position, he used the rotate command, or the rotate manipulator, and the way to get that rotate manipulator is just to click on that blue text in the heads-up display until the rotate comes up, and then that's where you get that rotation thing, and then you can just drag the disc to drag the ring to rotate it. Yep.
And then anytime I see where there's like these little look out, I try to make sure that I get a solid edge that starts and stops on one of them. And that way I can just grab that edge and I can pull out from there and extrude out of there. And so that starts to form that. And then we can just push these points around. So again, I have another extrusion coming out over here. So I want to make it start and stop kind of right there so that we can do the tail. And I'm just holding Alt and left clicking and dragging. There's really no other tools. I'm working in the vert mode, obviously.
And there's just another question that came in about how when you're doing this with the line, if you just traced and outlined and then thickened it, and the answer is no, you need to do a little bit more than just outline it. You are actually kind of creating the surface as you are pushing and pulling and extruding these faces.
Yep, and the big thing too with the style of modeling is all of these little square and rectangle patches basically represent the topology of the model. And if I'm clicking and drawing with a curve, I may not get cross sections right here or UVs where I necessarily want them later on. And I'll show you a reason for that is if we come along here, I'm going to reach a point up here where the tail divides out here. So now I have a split that has to be dealt with right here. So as you can see, that doesn't really work. Getting this to split off gets a little weird. But if I do insert edge, I can insert an edge right smack dab through there, and all of our topology now is just flowing nicely through here. And then when these guys have to divide off, they can simply start pulling out and dividing off without any trouble. So laying out curves works, but it doesn't necessarily do all the planning ahead that you need to represent the shape accurately. A lot of times you'll have cross sections where you don't want them, or not enough cross sections because of the number of control points that were in the curve. So doing it this way, make sure that everything just kind of ends up where you want it.
And there's just another question coming in about wouldn't there be an easier way if you could just curve outline this, fill it in with the patch, and then extrude it. But I guess how do you, I mean, because that's something that I'm sure you've done in the past as well with nerves, Travis. How do you like switch over to thinking this way with T Splines? We're actually making the surface. Like, was that a difficult thing for you to switch over and think this way, or?
It took some practice. I mean, this is in other software packages. This is known as extrusion modeling, and it's just I think T Splines shares a lot of modeling techniques with subdivision modeling, and surface modeling. Everything's about the curves, so it takes you a little while to understand that this is a different process of modeling that works with surface modeling. So while it is completely compatible and you can work that way, once you sort of wrap your mind around this whole process of extruding and making faces where you need it, it's not that technical. It's actually, if anything, it's an easier way to model. It can help you achieve simple shape pretty quick. But I mean, there's a few times where I'll still use curves when I'm using T Splines, but I rarely will use curves when I'm working with T Splines. Only really if I have to match up to some existing other polysurface or surface in Rhino will I break out the curves.
Here's a question from a while back. Travis, other than going from the T Splines model to ZBrush in box mode, how do you proceed in making a complete solid out of your ring? I've had a lot of problems doing exactly that uh, concerning two NURBs and then doing booleans?
For me, it's not important. I, I'm a firm believer that all signet-style models should always be machined and never RP'd. So I don't worry about it with this particular model. If it is a problem, though, the nice thing is that T-splines are always solids. So unless you like turn the faces inside out or something, it's always going to be a nice, perfect solid that will have no trouble doing Boolean union or subtraction operations on. So there's that back.
Then here's another question. What's the benefit of a T-spline over a quad mesh?
Well, a quad mesh, which is essentially, oops, let's stick in this, and we'll turn that off. The quad mesh, I mean, there's no form of subdivision in Rhino itself. So if your quad mesh isn't smooth like this, you're essentially going to be working like this. You know, I mean, that's the same thing as having the quad mesh. And you can't edit quad meshes in Rhino directly like this. You know, it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't keep all that smooth tangency.
So the T-spline actually is a smooth surface, whereas a mesh is just facets.
Yeah, it is just faceted. But it's kind of neat. And if you have a good quad mesh model, T-splines will convert it into a T-spline, which you can then convert into a Rhino surface, a Rhino poly surface.
Yeah, no, that's right. And my guess is probably 10 to 15% of the people that own T-splines do it just, that's why they use it, is to convert those quad meshes over to Rhino NURB surfaces. So it
Yep, it's a great importer.
looks like what you just did is converted it to NURBs. Could you just kind of hover over the icon to show how that happens? So just right click on that convert icon, and this will just turn it into a Rhino poly surface. And the shape actually won't change at all. You'll need to add some, kind of break it out into NURBS patches.
Yeah, and it becomes a perfect solid too, which is great. So I mean that'll go off to any RP.
So here's another question. Is there a good way to simplify your model once you realize you've gone too far with too much detail? Let's see. Are you still there, Travis? I think we may have lost Travis. Okay, well, we told Travis the webinar would go for about 45 minutes, and he gave us 51. So um, maybe this is what I get for asking too many questions off script.
Oh, I'm back.
Hey.
Sorry, it's the price you pay for living out in the sticks.
um, yeah, that a while ago Kyle told me that he lost his internet when a moose tore the satellite dish off his roof. But
yeah.
Let's see, any other questions coming up? Let's see, do you see any, Tom? Oh, okay. So here's just a question. Hey guys, I love T Splines, but this kind of model is much easier and more precise to make in ArtCam. Do you have
Mm,
experience with that, Trev?
I do. I've been an ArtCam user since version 3.5, and where I'd have to disagree with that is that you can make simple adjustments in ArtCam, sure, and you can do some light sculpting work in it. But to make major changes in ArtCam is going to be very, very difficult. You also can't work on that ring very well, especially if you're working on the whole thing together, and you're going to have that thing unwrapped. So you're going to be looking at it bent and distorted. And if you want to go back in there and make dramatic changes to it, it's going to be quite a bit more challenging. You know, uh, uh, some of that, to a degree, yes and no. I mean, the nice thing about T Splines is it's sort of working in a fashion that you're sort of familiar with if you're in sculpt mode in ArtCam. So if you like sculpting in ArtCam, you'll like T Splines. And the other great thing is that this remains completely 3D. I mean, this is not a 2.5D deal. So when you're working on pieces that require twisting and turning and stuff like that, I mean, ArtCam simply is not going to do that. ArtCam is always going to work from a height field off of a grayscale. So, some of it, yes, you can do like this sculpty stuff and stuff like that, but getting this twisting and turning in here, you're going to have to sculpt all that by hand in ArtCam, and it will be more challenging. And then working with it out here on the ring is going to be challenging too, because I mean, unless you're pasted down in this view, are you going to look at everything unwrapped and try to factor how it all bends and stuff? I don't know. ArtCam's great for a lot of things, but I don't know. I don't prefer making stuff like this in ArtCam.
So I guess a related question: how can you work with T Splines inside of Matrix?
Matrix 7 now has a direct built-in T Splines tools. It's got some stuff that, like this signet ring that I just built here, it's got a builder that just spits the ring right out on the screen and allows you to use handles and adjust it and all that good stuff. I can't actually turn it on. The version of T Splines that Matrix 7 uses is newer than the version that's released, so it's I didn't want to run all of this stuff and it be slightly different than what's being downloaded right now. So otherwise I would show you 7. But if you want to use it in Matrix 6, you just simply type toolbar, and you can pull up the T Splines toolbars right here. By typing toolbar. This will work the same way in Matrix. So you can type toolbar, you can do your main icons or whatever, and that'll get all your toolbars up, and they'll stay up in Matrix once you've opened them. And then it works the exact same way. Since Matrix is just a giant plugin for Rhino, it works exactly the same way.
So
but
there's.
Matrix.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go.
Oh, there was a question that came on that I asked just before we lost you. Is there a good way to simplify your model once you realize you've gone too far in detail?
Yeah, I mean, at any point, obviously if you get too heavy, it's going to get challenging, but you can come in here and select edges and faces, especially edges. But if you find that there's an edge ring that you don't want any longer, you can come in and simply select it and delete it and start removing that information from the T-spline, which of course is going to make some changes to the model, but obviously that's probably what you're after. And that's another reason why I like modeling from a plan, is that it's an easy way to keep your model as simple as possible. You only extrude in edges that you need, and you tend to try to skip ones that you don't need. And that takes some practice. You know, I can't even tell you that I'm super good at that right now. I've been using T Splines since about April or so, and it takes a little practice to get used to when to add resolution, when not to add resolution, and I look at a lot of stuff on the internet and try to see how other people use other packages that use subdivision modeling styles and see how they lay out topology and stuff. So
Yeah, and I think
yeah,
I think I just add that, yeah, you can definitely just delete edges, and that does a. I mean, that's also kind of a way of smoothing out your model as you remove that detail. One thing that I always recommend though is to save a copy of the T-spline geometry when you get it to a point that you like it, and then you can just come back to that as well. Because if it is hard to undo to exactly where you were before. So if you do save a copy, that's probably another reliable way of kind of going backwards. Let's see. Well, Trav, we've got a lot of autograph requests, and other questions for you that I think I'll just let you read. But
I'll have to see them. I'm running my screen resolution much smaller so that it's easier to broadcast all this. So I'm having a hard time seeing all the questions here, but here's the I can see. Yeah, you guys are great. Yeah, they're too much. Yeah. So anything other than who wants a lock of my hair?
just a couple other ones. Can you take a NURBS model done in Matrix and convert it to a T-spline?
Yes. Yes, but now, you know, results may vary because the T-spline is going to get converted. So if we sweep a surface here, let's just draw something here. Oh, shoot. Well, actually, let's just extrude that. So we'll just do extrude curve. So that's just a good old-fashioned Rhino surface. If you click this icon, convert to T-spline, it now becomes a T-spline. We can increase the mesh here. Now it is a T-spline face. But it's going to be very important that the number of control points that are in your surface, your original surface, you're going to have to pay a lot of attention to that. Like when you're doing lofts and stuff like that. You know, Rhino's kind of forgiving in that if you loft one curve to another curve, they don't necessarily always have to be the same number of control points. But when you go to start converting that stuff over into T-splines, those things start becoming important because of the face counts that you get. So
yeah, and I think what you saw here, Trav, whenever you have you can convert any untrimmed degree 3 NURBS to T-splines and the surface will not change. And my guess is this surface is not degree 3 in both directions, and that's probably why it changed when
yeah,
you converted
it did
that. Yes, as long as it's an untrimmed degree 3, you can go straight to T-splines. If it's trimmed, and that's probably what a decent amount of your finished rings will be, you'll just lose the trimming information. So I think usually the best strategy is to kind of just start with T-splines. We have done a few webinars showing how you can start with a trimmed model, modify it, and retrim it again. But I think T-splines is mainly kind of used at the start of the process. Okay, well that's all the questions we see, Trav. So thanks so much for doing this with us.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. So that was that.